Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Corn Belt Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. As you look at the last 24 hours of precipitation across the entire continental U.S., we've been watching this low-pressure system that brought parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt some rain here midweek continue to lift off to the north and east. We've also seen a corridor of showers and storms across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, and also seen some thunderstorms developing during the afternoon of the last few days across parts of the high plains. Over the last 30 days, our precipitation departure from normal. We do continue to watch a couple of smaller areas here that do badly need some rain, the first of which across the northern plains and the far north Midwest here, northern Minnesota. That extends into the Canadian prairie here, where we actually have some drought beginning to develop. And then another area here with patchy dry spots across parts of the Ohio River Valley into parts of the Mid-South here, Kentucky and Tennessee, and then local areas here across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio that have actually been quite dry over the last 2 weeks or so. Now that story is not the same for everyone in the eastern Corn Belt. Parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio here still badly trying to get planting completed here at the very last moment. So for some areas here, badly needing rain, but some areas very nearby also badly needing a few more dry days, and unfortunately it does look like the recent dry-ish window is going to be coming to an end. As we look at the next 5 days of precipitation here from the National Blended Model, it highlights a couple of active corridors here. That first one here across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, but the largest area here across the eastern Corn Belt into the central plains here from Kansas and Oklahoma on towards the Ohio Valley here, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, looking to shift back to a very active pattern over the next 5 to 10 days. Also watching this area here across the high plains for the continued development of afternoon and evening thunderstorms, producing some locally heavy rain and maybe some hail there as far as some severe weather over the next week or so. The GFS ensemble forecast here for the week 1 period through June 21st highlights the same areas here across the Canadian prairies into the upper Midwest, and then this big corridor here from the central and southern plains into the Ohio River Valley, including the eastern Corn Belt here, Illinois through Ohio, looking very active and very stormy here for the next week. Week 2, I'm going to show this just quickly. This forecast is supposed to focus on really the 5-day time frame, but just to let you know that the GFS ensemble model continues to show wetter than normal forecast precipitation values here as we head into the time frame June 21st through June 28th. So again, we'll leave details on this one for a little bit later, but it does look like we're going to continue to be active across much of the Corn Belt, even as we head into the last part of June. As the sun rises now on Friday morning, we're continuing to watch a couple of areas here of showers and storms and cloud cover associated with that. First across Minnesota and Wisconsin, but then also this area here across parts of the central U.S. here, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska, seeing some cloud cover and some rain, and that'll continue to shift off to the east slowly with thunderstorms developing across parts of central Illinois as we head into the overnight. Looking at the radar picture here, we see those same corridors here across the upper Midwest and then across the central U.S. here with those showers and storms making their way off to the east. And those are in response to these little ripples within the flow of the jet stream, where as we head to a more typical June pattern, being a lot less of this kind of thing with those big major obvious troughs in the jet stream, and something more like this where we've got subtle ripples within the flow, and we see 2 corridors here where that's going to be favored here across the central U.S. and across the northern plains and the Canadian prairies here, where we, again, that's the exact zones where we expect to be active over the next 5 days, and that makes sense, again, as we watch these little ripples within the flow as each one of those short waves interacts with the typical June warm and humid air mass. It doesn't take much, and these little short waves are enough to kick off clusters of thunderstorms that can produce some locally heavy rain. Now, you might stop me here in some parts of the Corn Belt, especially the eastern Corn Belt here, and say, a warm and humid June air mass, what are you talking about? I'm waking up on Friday morning to a crisp and cool October-like morning, and that certainly is the case here in Champaign. As I walked out the door this morning, it was only 50 degrees. Our dew point's in the mid-40s. It definitely feels like October. It is not a warm and a humid air mass out there. As we check in with the dew points here, we've got an area of high pressure that's been sitting over the region that brought this cooler and less humid air mass. And as we watch the clockwise flow around that begin to shift off to the east, watch what happens to our dew points here as some of the easterly, or on the left side here, that southerly flow begins to tap into the Gulf of Mexico. Watch what happens here across the Corn Belt. I'll go ahead and let this play. And we see the flow come back off the Gulf of Mexico, and we start to see warm and humid air mass being pumped back into the central U.S., including the Corn Belt here, and that is why by the time we get to the end of the weekend, we've got a plenty humid air mass here, plenty volatile air mass to support the development of these showers and thunderstorm clusters as those shortwave troughs embedded within the jet stream interact with that. So kind of cool here as we see that high pressure slide off to the east. We're going to resume a warmer and a more humid pattern across the Corn Belt, and that is why we'll see the return to the active weather pattern and the development of these daily rounds of showers and storms. As we check in with the high-resolution rapid refresh model, the precipitation forecast for the next 24 hours or so, and you can watch these two corridors first off to the north and then across the central U.S., beginning to move off to the east into the southeast. As we head into Friday afternoon, we'll be watching for the development of scattered storms across the high plains here, anywhere from, the Dakotas down into Kansas and Kentucky. Isolated severe storms going to be possible there. And then as we head into the overnight hours, we'll be watching this area here in the central and eastern Corn Belt from Iowa to central Illinois and Indiana for the development of thunderstorms. Could be a very noisy overnight, especially across parts of central Illinois, central Indiana with the development of thunderstorms. Again, not expecting any widespread severe weather in that area, but it seems primed for one of those very noisy and lightning-filled overnights across parts of central Illinois into Indiana. As we head into Saturday morning, we'll watch those thunderstorms begin to fade, but then Saturday afternoon, across the same areas here, across the central and eastern Corn Belt, watching for those thunderstorms to begin to redevelop. Same thing across the Dakotas, and then we'll watch for the same thing across the High Plains, the development of those afternoon showers and storms across these same areas, those same corridors of the northern plains, the Ohio River Valley, eastern Corn Belt, and the High Plains of Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. As we take a look at the total precipitation values from the total precipitation forecast from the HRRR, this takes us through Saturday morning. So just looking at the precipitation here Friday into Friday night, and we see those same corridors here with the precipitation across the northern plains into the upper Midwest. Also seeing the overnight storms that develop Friday night into Saturday morning across Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, and then the scattered nature of the precipitation here across parts of the High Plains. I want to show you something here from the HRRR as we zoom in on parts of Missouri, Iowa, and Indiana. And what I want to show you, I'll go ahead and let this play, and then I'll pause it as it restarts. And what I want you to see is this kind of, you see this little swirl move out of parts of Missouri into Illinois as we head into the Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. And what that is an MCV, a mesoscale convective vortex, and you can kind of loosely, as not doing and meteorologists any justice to say that it's the ghost of the thunderstorms from Kansas and Missouri during the day before, but this can happen, especially as we get into the summer. We'll get thunderstorms that flare up, say in Kansas, for example, and those storms track off to the east, moving across parts of Missouri during the evening and the overnight. They begin to fade and die out, but left in their wake is an area of low pressure, a compact area of low pressure left behind by those thunderstorms. That area of low pressure then can continue on the next day before tapping into the peak heating of the following afternoon and flare back up with thunderstorms. And they can create kind of a locally enhanced area that's favorable for severe weather and sometimes even favorable for a couple of tornadoes, all because of that MCV moving through the area. And this I wanted to show it because it's a great example of what causes these headaches when we try to pin down where the clusters of thunderstorms are going to develop day to day and the associated area of the heaviest rainfall. We're trying to pin down who's going to get soaked, and it all comes down to where do these thunderstorms develop, which all comes down to where do these little clues end up, which all comes down to where the thunderstorms develop today. So tomorrow's weather hinges drastically on what happens today, and that's just why when we get into a pattern like this where we're not talking about big bowling ball sized troughs moving out of the southwestern U.S. and easy to predict where the thunderstorms and the heavy rain is going to be, we shift to a pattern here where it's really we got to dive into the details. And, when you talk about the butterfly effect of things like this with one day really impacting the following day, it just becomes a watching it on day by day type thing where we can highlight the zones that are going to be active. But as far as saying this is where the thunderstorms will develop tomorrow and who's going to get soaked, it's on the edge of our science, and it's something that these little details have a huge impact on. So let's take a look at the high-resolution NAM model, which will take us a little bit further. It'll take us into Sunday afternoon. We'll do the same thing and pause here. I've got the simulated radar on the left and the total precipitation on the right, so we can watch things accumulate in real time. We're heading through Friday evening now into Saturday overnight. We've covered this with the HRRR. You're seeing the overnight storms developing across parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt here, central Illinois, central Indiana. Maybe a very, again, loud and stormy overnight, Friday night into Saturday morning. As we head into Saturday afternoon, seeing these clusters of storms developing again across parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt. Again, the detail is going to be a bit unclear as we head into that time frame. Seeing those thunderstorms also Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon across the northern plains, leaving some locally heavy rainfall amounts here of 1 to 2 inches across parts of North Dakota into Minnesota and Wisconsin. Let's take this into Saturday, heading into the early overnight, and we're seeing the suggestion here from the high-resolution NAM model that we could see a bow echo or a squall line developing across parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, perhaps producing some locally severe weather, some gusty winds, and some heavy downpours. Also seeing clusters of thunderstorms developing across the high plains here. As we head into Saturday night and into early Sunday morning, I want to go ahead and get to the end here and just show you the nature of the precipitation totals on the right here when we talk about the eastern Corn Belt, seeing kind of corridors going off with these heavier thunderstorm tracks where the heaviest rainfall does fall. And that's exactly why, I say that just don't focus in on what this model says here. Again, if you can find yourself, you live in northern Indiana, don't look at this and say, oh no, we're going to get 2 to 4 inches of rain between now and Sunday morning, because it very well may be that cluster of thunderstorms that produce that corridor, maybe it shifts off to the east, southeast a little further, or maybe that thunderstorm cluster develops here in central Illinois and then tracks off to the east, southeast. Just notice that it's this region here that's going to have the highest potential for these clusters of thunderstorms and the potential for one of these thunderstorm clusters to drop 2 to 3 inches on top of you. But some areas here maybe remain, I don't think anyone's going to escape this entirely. But perhaps some folks here are picking up, only a trace of precipitation if you dodge some of these clusters. And then, again, maybe some people seeing more than one of the clusters of storms tacking on, 2 to 4 inches of rain in some local areas. So we're noticing the zones, we're noticing the corridors, but we're kind of accepting that the details here just aren't going to show up in the long range. We'll look at the European model here to kind of take us into next week. We've got the look at the jet stream on the left and a look at the precipitation forecast on the right. And we'll go ahead and take this through. We'll let it go ahead and start up here, and we'll go reset. We'll go through the weekend kind of quickly, but you see the two corridors here, the short wave across the northern plains. I kind of missed there with that oval. The short wave here across the northern U.S., the short waves embedded within the flow across the central United States, kicking off showers and storms as we head through the weekend. We'll go ahead and get into the first part of next week, into Monday now, and then heading into Tuesday, and it's just a similar picture here. We're not seeing a big trough across the central plains here. We're just seeing these little ripples within the flow, kicking off shower and thunderstorm clusters across the central United States. Let's go ahead and take it into the end of the week. Before we do see the suggestion that maybe we do see a more organized trough developing across the northern plains, this would be something that would concern me for the development of some severe weather across maybe the Dakotas and the high plains here as we get into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of next week. But of course, we're talking about 6 to 8 days off into the future now. So we'll leave the details there for some of the later forecasts, but it does just, look like it's going to remain active here in these corridors across the eastern Corn Belt and then across the northern plains with scattered showers and storms, and then perhaps a resumption of, or at least the beginning of severe weather season. It's been very quiet as far as severe weather goes across the Dakotas, but this is typically their climatological peak here as we head into late June into July, so perhaps a seasonally appropriate severe weather event as we get into the late week next week across the Dakotas. Total precipitation forecast here, we got the European model on the left and the GFS on the right, just to kind of show you the differences here. And if you're looking to me to tell you which of these models is right, or you're trying to figure out which model is right, I'll let you know that neither of them is right, because again, the details here are going to be missed by these models. All we can do is look to them for the clues and the active corridors, and I would argue that those are clear here on both models. I'll go ahead and pause this and take it out to the end just so we can see the total forecast here for the next 7 days. This takes us through Friday morning of next week. And there you go. The story is clear on both of those. The active pattern here across the central and eastern Corn Belt here, the other zone here across the northern plains, and then as we look at the GFS over on the other side, The same thing, very active across the central and eastern Corn Belt, from Missouri into Ohio on both of these, from Kansas into Ohio, I would say, this first corridor, and then the second corridor here across the north, showing up very much on both of these weather models. Just to let you guys know, or just to show you here, this is also what the folks at the National Weather Service are calling for as we head through the weekend. This takes us through 7 a.m. on Monday, and they're showing the same corridor here. This one from Kansas and Oklahoma into the eastern Corn Belt here, picking up anywhere from 1 to 4 inches. The 4-inch totals, those are going to be locally picked up here. It's not going to be widespread. And then that other corridor here across the Dakotas into the upper Midwest. And then our third corridor here, that would be the high plains there, parts of Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas. The severe weather outlook for the next 3 days here is the day one. This will be Friday with a slight risk across parts of the Central Plains, Kansas, and Colorado. A marginal risk surrounding that, and then a marginal risk here across parts of the Northern Plains and the upper Midwest. Day two, slight risk across more of the central Corn Belt here, Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa. Here's where that slight risk is, but we've got a marginal risk extending into parts of the eastern Corn Belt here, central Illinois, Indiana, parts of Ohio, and Kentucky in there as well. And then day three, this is Sunday. The slight risk shifts off to the southern plains, but we still continue to have a marginal risk right in this corridor where we remain active from Kansas to Ohio. So a marginal risk that a couple storms could turn severe with damaging winds. Going to be the primary threat, perhaps an isolated strong storm producing some large hail and maybe an isolated tornado or two possible as well. Finishing here, talking about temperatures, the 5-day temperature anomaly forecast that takes us through June 19th, remaining cooler overall across the Corn Belt, and as we move into the days 6 through 10 time frames, so now the 20th through the 24th of June, the cooler anomalies shift off to the northwest just a little bit, but still overall cooler to near average across the Corn Belt as we head again from the 20th to 24th of June. High temperature forecast for the next 5 days, just to close it out. Your Friday high temps in the upper 80s to the 90s across the high plains here, across the central and northern plains, upper 70s where it's still cooler with the impacts of that area of high pressure across parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt. As we look at the Saturday, high temperatures warming up in the eastern Corn Belt. There we go, upper 70s and 80s beginning to move back into that region. Here is Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday morning ag forecast video, and then I'll have your next Corn Belt regional update for you midday on Tuesday. Have a wonderful Friday, a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again on Tuesday.